Hello, everyone, and thank you for attending today's webinar, What's Changing in Solar Mounting and How Installers Can Stay Ahead. I'm Billy Lute, Managing Editor of Solar Power World. Before we get started, let's go over some of the features of this platform that you can use throughout the presentation. You can submit any questions related to today's webinar in the Q&A window, and if you do this on demand, we can still answer those questions after the fact. We'll try to answer these questions during the webcast, though, later on in the presentation. And lastly here, you can adjust the size of the slides on your screen using the icon on the top right corner of the slide widget. You can expand any of the on-screen boxes to fit your preference. If you encounter any technical issues with the presentation, try refreshing your browser. This tends to resolve most issues. If that doesn't work, try closing other applications and browser tabs running on your device. You can click Help in the top menu for additional troubleshooting options, or if all else fails, you can ask us for help directly in the Ask Question widget. I'd like to thank SnapNrack for sponsoring today's presentation. And now to introduce today's presenter, we are joined by Johan Alfsen, Regional Sales Manager for California and Hawaii with SnapNrack. And I'll turn things over to Johan.
Thanks, Billy. Thanks for having us. So we are talking about racking, and I'm going to hop to it, and I'll probably move pretty fast through some of this. So if you have questions, please throw it into the question box and we will probably answer them at the end. We have plenty of time. We'll save about 15 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes at the end to chat a little more. But my presentations tend to be a little bit technical, and while my title does say sales, I actually come from a background of about almost 20 years in the industry doing, I started as a solar installer back in the early 2000s and then jumped into the manufacturing world. The company I was installing for actually were the creators of Quick Mount PV back in the early days. And that was a great product that solved a lot of problems. And we're actually going to talk a little bit about history and of mounting and how we got to where we are today and what's coming and kind of the trends. And then I just dove deep and have been with racking manufacturers ever since, working on product development, product marketing, product training, and naturally all those things lend to sales. So I really just like helping people find the right products and having solutions to better do their installs. So to get a feel for everyone in the crowd today digitally, usually I love to just ask questions, and I'm pretty interactive in presentations. If you've ever been to any conferences where we're doing technical trainings, I'm typically there doing them in person. I do a lot of things with like NABCEP at their conference. I'm on their planning committee and help organize some of those presentations. So I always like to ask how long you've been in the industry. So if you can, click on your appropriate answer here, and I'll give it a little bit of time, but it's always good to know who's looking to get into the industry, how long you've been in the industry. I usually ask if you're an installer or manufacturer, but I'll pretend that everyone's kind of in for the technical side of things. So we're going to talk a lot about the technical application of products, racking, where we started, how it's evolved. I think it's important, whether you're new or been in the industry a long time, to understand where we came from and how we got to where we are now and why some of these changes you're seeing, which also plays a role in things like R&R, removal and reinstall, which is a really big topic right now. I could do a webinar just on that. A lot of companies are getting calls to remove a system and reinstall it or do some roofing. Solar's at that age now to where we are mature and the industry has, outlived some old systems or maybe old roofs. And, this all plays into some of the stuff I'm going to talk about now is, roofing is a big part of this. I'm going to talk about that. And I think this helps to understand old racking systems, new racking systems, where we are now, and how you can choose the right products and And I wear the SnapNrack badge, but I've worked with all kinds of different racking, and at SnapNrack, we're really good about having a lot of solutions, but we're happy to point you in the other direction if there's another product that might work better for you that's not ours, and it's totally okay. I mean, we just want to help you with your installs. Okay, so it looks like we have some pretty good numbers here. It looks like the majority are in that 1 to 5 range, so that's good to know. Uh, Quite a bit in the 11 to 20. So this proves my point that the industry has grown up quite a bit, and people are in the industry a lot longer. Systems are lasting a lot longer, and that's all going to play into what we're talking about here. So I'll briefly talk about SnapNrack and our story. Racking system basics. If you're new to the industry, actually going back, there is a 15% or 14.3% of looking to get into the industry. And then it looks like we have some seasoned people here, so that's good. But I think it's good to know some of the basics. So I'll try not to bore you too much with what is racking, but just go over the basic components. Roofing from a solar installer's perspective, I think that's going to set the stage really for why we're doing what we're doing with different racking systems. Site visit considerations is a big one, as I talked about. Removal and reinstall. This also plays a role in brand new systems, just making sure you don't inherit any kind of issues on the roof. And then we'll talk a little bit about history of solar mounting. I think that's important as we get into the types of mounting systems and innovations that we've done to reduce costs, improve efficiency, and also maintain quality, which is a big one on my list. So SnapNrack's been around quite a long time. The industry has grown up a bit, and we've been right there along the ride. I've personally been with SnapNrack for almost 2 years now, but I've always known about them, and they've always had really good designs. As you may know, we've been involved with a lot of big installers and helped them grow their product lines and what to use. And what that's done for us is, and we've branched out since, and we're our own company now, but working with big companies like Sunrun in the early days, it allowed us to design products to improve their efficiency and also test out products with their crews all over the nation and provide a lot of good solution. It's also helped us really dial in our domestic content, which is a big demand right now. So now they're our biggest customer, and we also have recently made agreements with distributors to serve the rest of the country for all installers, which is quite exciting. And that's why I joined. I've always loved the product, and I love what they do. So we're really big on working with installers. We obviously listen to our installers, build products based on that feedback, and we're pretty agile to move fast to get these products to you guys. So I'm very excited to show you guys what we got going on and talk a little bit about the industry in general. Types of racking systems, there's a ton of different types. I'm leaving out a few here, but talking more on the residential and light commercial side of things, obviously you have rail-based systems, which are the standard, 2 rails per row. Some heavy snow load areas, you might use a third rail on big modules, but typically it's two rails per row. Then you've got rail-free systems, which we'll talk about how that evolved. And then there's ballasted and ground mounts. But I'm primarily going to focus on rail-based and talk a little bit about rail-free, as it's been very innovative and how it's changed the game a little bit. SnapNrack does have a ground mount, but we don't do anything ballasted. All of our light commercial stuff is mechanically attached, so standoffs and rail, pretty traditional. But there are some good ballast systems out there if that's more preferred in your area. And it's very regional based. Different areas call for different things, and that's what we're going to talk about here. So racking components, I know a lot of you guys have been in the industry quite a long time, so I won't bore you with this too much, but for the newbies that are just in the industry, or maybe you're on the sales side, I think if you're on the sales side, the more technical products, the more you can eloquently talk about the details of an install and what you use, and I think it does matter. So obviously there's roof attachments or mounts or standoffs. People use different terms, but we typically say roof attachments. That's the core and what attaches to a residential and some light commercial systems. Flashings are the waterproofing element. Rails and splices are pretty obvious. They're the long extruded rails, and splices bring the typically around 14-foot rails will be joined together by splices. Wire management components are very important. We'll talk about those. Clamps have actually come a long way, so mid clamps and end clamps. And then you get some other accessories like junction boxes and other things to help with the install. So roof attachments, as I mentioned, are the basis of everything. If you don't have roof attachments ready to go on the job site, you can't really start the project aside from some electrical. So this is a major component, and it's what physically connects the entire system to the roof. So this is a key element, and waterproofing is a big part of it. Excuse me. So we have roof attachments for all types of different roof types. Composition shingles, some people just call it comp, some people call it asphalt, but typically it's known as comp for short. Tile roofs, there's all kinds of different profiles. Metal roof, same deal. There's a lot of different profiles out there. And then flat roofs, you get some other kinds of style flat roofs. So in the roofing world, they typically refer to these as steep slope or pitched roofs, and then low slope. And in the solar industry, we call it flat roofs typically, but there's no real such thing as a flat roof. There's always some kind of slope or grade to shed water out. And that top image is a very classic image that shows the degrees and the pitch. And you might hear somebody say, 4 and 12, which is pretty standard, or a degree like, if you go 4 and 12, that's going to reach around that, somewhere around 16, 18 or 15, somewhere around there. So you might hear them say degrees, like it's an 18 degree pitch or something like that, or 4 and 12, 5 and 12. But when you get down into the 2 and 12, roughly, depends on the roofing manufacturer, that will change the game. So a good picture that I often refer to is that bottom right picture that shows both a low slope roof, that's the closest to our view there, and then the steep slope roof over there with shingles. So the low slope roof there has I'm going to guess it's around a 2 and 12 pitch, which might be too low of a pitch for composition shingles. So that's why you don't see shingles on that roof, and it's rolled asphalt. It's torched down. So those are sheets of asphalt that are adhered to the roof and the underlayment underneath there. And they're not shingled, meaning you can't pry a roofing bar underneath there and slip in a metal flashing. It requires a different kind of top mounted flashing or some kind of torch down cap sheet if a roofer is doing it. So all of this is really, really important to understand. And I'll break down a little bit of the roofing as we talk about it, and this will also help with site visits. So this is something that I think installers are starting to take a little bit more serious and get a little bit more granular. And the reason I bring this up and how it relates to the topic is because when you're choosing a product, which there's many different products, if you pull up any racking manufacturer, including SnapNrack, and you go to our comp shingle section, if you go to, I believe, our website and you hover over comp, I think there's roof type, hover over comp, you click on that comp roof and it will pull up a full menu of comp shingle mounting products and your options. And most manufacturers have a metal flashing option or a butyl mount. And we'll talk about that in a minute here and how that's evolved and changed. The standard has changed recently. But all of that's really good to know because your site visits might tell you, do you need a product that's going to attach to the rafter? Are these shingles all glued down and not going to allow you to put in a flashing? What's the age of the roof? Are there any issues on it? I usually treat site visits kind of like going around a rental car and pointing out pre-existing damage. So I have seen shingles have a manufacturer defect. Some of those examples there, the A, B, C, D, are examples of cracked shingles, blistered shingles. You might have hail damage. There might be a manufacturer defect. As I mentioned, some of those cracks are a manufacturer defect. Sometimes, chemicals get mixed in wrong, things happen. There might be a recall on that roofing. All of that stuff can be replaced if there's a warranty in place. It's important to go back and find and do as much diagnostics as you can on the roof. The warranties might be still intact. There's a workmanship warranty, a workmanship warranty of the roofer, which is unique to that roofer, and then there's going to be a warranty of the product itself, and that might incorporate, maybe there's a recall on it, or maybe there's a manufacturer defect or something's going on, and you need to know, before you throw a 25-year life solar PV system on top of that and penetrate through it and take that responsibility, you want to know what you're getting yourself into. So this is important to know. Some of those warranties might be long gone and it's all on you. Solar installers do take a lot of risk on, so it's important to document, take a lot of pictures, understand what you're doing, and you might be able to re-roof and lump that into the cost of the system and maybe get some rebates depending on your area or maybe the manufacturer, or incentives that are in place. They change all the time, as we know. And then getting into the attic, looking for water stains, cracked rafters, damage, pre-existing damage that you didn't do. Looking at skylights and vent pipes, not all roofers, are perfect, and they might have had a failure. It might not be their fault. It might be their fault. Who knows? But you want to look up who the roofer of record was. As much information on the roof system as you can find. Like I said, some of it might be long gone. And you're in the dark and you're going with it. And you got to figure this out on your own. A lot of install companies are starting to adapt and have a roofer on staff, or have or acquire a roofing company. Or if you don't have either of those and you own your own solar company, it's very good to get in touch with the local roofer, develop a relationship, because I guarantee you that roofer might be getting asked, do you do solar? And you may be getting asked, what roof is this and what can I do? Or you might have to re-roof, things like that. And so understanding all the roof types is very important. So I go into more detail on this in some of our other trainings for SnapNrack and some trainings I do on my own as well. But talking about different shingles, there are different styles and they do have different lifespans. But understanding the basic construction, which is different regionally based, but knowing your area, there's typically a truss system with rafters. There's going to be plywood. Sometimes you might run across some skip sheeting or some old style roofing. Then there's underlayment, which is pretty standard. Leaf felt paper. You get some synthetic underlayment as well. And then shingles. And different shingles have different attributes and lifespans, like I mentioned. So it's just good to know that, like 3-tab, for example, is cheap, doesn't last that long. And some of these more presidential or high definition shingles can be a little bit more longer lasting and be a little bit difficult to work with. You might have different types of shingles where you have like a decorative shingle that's in the way, things like that. And then understanding the truss system. I get asked how to find rafters all the time, so I just threw this in there. There's a huge list, as you can see, of trying to find it, trying to find the rafters to make a positive connection, because there are times where you miss the rafter. I always show pictures of the bay sticking over the roof edge, because a lot of times those are the actual rafters sticking out. So if you look real close, I've got an installer up there. He's actually putting his tape measure over there, marking it, and I'm telling him where to put the tape measure and then make a few marks, and then you can transfer measurement points. So a lot of good tricks in there, but I'm sure you're already doing some of those. And then a tile roof is completely different than a comp shingle roof. There's all kinds of things happening on a tile roof that are not necessarily the same as a comp shingle roof. Both do have underlayment, but on a tile roof, the underlayment becomes a lot more critical on a waterproofing system of a tile roof. So choosing your products and understanding the region and maybe the AHJ and what they require, because there are some requirements for higher standards for tile roofs. And I'll talk about that here in a minute as we get into that section of waterproofing. But just understanding that tile roofs are not all built the same. And wherever you're based or wherever you're doing work, some of you guys might be multi-state. It's just good to know that, Southern California has, where I'm based out of San Diego, has a lot of tile roofs. And actually it's a mix of different attachment styles. You get like battens or directly attached with no battens and everything's nailed in. Some of them are not nailed in and have the battens, and they're just gravity based and weight. And then you get into Florida, where that's not allowed in some areas because of high wind speeds, and they are all glued in. So that's a good example of how that's going to change your approach and what your mount. In Southern California, where I'm at, in most of California, they're using tile hooks, which you remove a tile, put in a hook, install it to the rafter, waterproof it, and you're good. In Florida, in some regions, not all, you can't necessarily just pull the tile out and install a tile hook. They're glued in and mortared in because of wind speeds and hurricane zones. So you have to either cut, notch, or break the tile and use a different mount that might be going to the decking. And there are other products that do that. So there are products out there that you can deck attach and avoid that go around and deal with these different style roofs, or tile roofs, I should say. So if you're in Florida, you're probably shaking your head and understand exactly what I'm talking about. If you're not in Florida, you can just rest assured that you're happy you don't have to deal with that. But in Southern California, we do get some funky, not funky, but more traditional tile roofs where you can't even stand on them. You just look at these clay roofs and they break, or old synthetic systems. I do work with customers in Hawaii, and they do get these porcelain roofs as well. But standard is the top there with the S tile, flat tile, and W tile that are concrete tiles. And the language is good to know and understand, because if you just say, it's Spanish tile, that doesn't really narrow it down. If you say clay tile, then it does narrow it down to maybe these more traditional systems where a lot of times you're just going to pull that tile out, put in comp shingle, and tile around it, because it's impossible to stand on some of these clay roofs. Whereas S tile looks like that, but it's more hardy, and you can walk on it, you can remove a tile, and you can install a solar mounting system on there. And there's different styles, and we'll talk about those here in this next slide. So tile roof mounting varies. There's and this is just vague, it's not one manufacturer. There's a lot of different cool innovations happening right now. SnapNrack does standardize on a tile hook. We do have standoffs as well, but so the more traditional is kind of a post and flashing, where you have some kind of, when I say standoff, it's a base and a post, and it comes off the base. That a lot of times they call them standoffs, but it's kind of a post and flashing method. There's either sometimes an underlayment flashing or a top tile flashing. I'll talk about that here in a minute. And then tile hooks are a little bit more cost effective and less labor intensive. You can remove a tile, put on a hook. Some of them are adjustable, and some of them are having more features to show, to simplify the process and the adjustability. So you're seeing some innovation even in tile hooks, which is very cool. And then you get things like replacement mounts and flashings, where you have adjustable sliding posts and different types of innovations out there. So pretty cool. Some things to look at that I've seen with tile hooks, I would say tile hooks and replacement flashings are kind of the standard. And then there's underlayment flashings, as I mentioned before. Something that we've done with our tile hook, you can't see it very up close, but with these adjustable tile hooks, like you see on the far left top picture there, that's an adjustable tile hook. So you can move that to different positions. You can use the swing arm on the left side or right side to swing the lags to hit the rafter and move out to get it to adjust into the right zone that you want to be in. SnapNrack has put in some really cool features where it won't slip to one side, and it has kind of a bent metal to keep the base and the arm in one position and not swing any other way. We've also added, if you look closely, rail hardware directly onto the tile hook arm, so you can snap the rail in, hence the name SnapNrack, and you don't have to put in any T-bolts or have any extra steps. Another really cool new product that it's not that new actually anymore, but installers don't realize we have it and are starting to learn it. And I've been really promoting this because it's so much easier. Underlayment flashings. When I say underlayment flashings, talking about that anatomy of a tile roof, you have the underlayment on any roof. You're going to have some sort of underlayment waterproof barrier, which is either synthetic, which is newer, or an old traditional felt paper, which you see there, the black paper. Some jurisdictions like Bakersfield in California, I think some parts of Fresno, some parts of even LA, just depends where you are. Jurisdictions have different requirements. They will require underlayment flashing underneath that. So and I have a slide to show this, but this is a product that allows you to take a peel and stick, aluminum topped peel and stick, malleable pre-cut butyl pads to go over the hook in two layers, and acquire that waterproofing. So a cool new little product that SnapNrack has pre-cut and put in packs of, I believe, 10, and they're doubled. So there's 10 or 20 total, but there's a base and a top. And it comes in pre-packed cuts. You can just peel and stick over it. And then the replacement flashings are very common. I've seen this mistake done a lot. So I just got asked a question by a group that does inspections, and they wanted me to do a presentation for what not to do and what to look for. And this is a big mistake I see on tile roofs, is where they just put the tile right on top of the hook and they just leave it. A roofer would call that out immediately for a couple reasons. One, you could step on that tile and break it pretty easily because now you have that metal, interfering with the tile, and the tile wants to seat properly so that you don't have any interference with debris, moisture, or things getting in there to cause any kind of issues. So that I point out as wrong. And you're supposed to either notch or grind out the tile so that the tile seats properly around the hook. That's the proper way to do it. It's not always easy on those W style or flat tile roofs. S tile is a lot easier to do that. You can even just chip away the lug on the back and have it sit properly. And if you can't, the replacement tile flashings are a good alternative to doing that. So I can go on tile roofs for the full hour if we really wanted to, but I just wanted to give you a brief kind of technical analysis on that and how different mounts play different roles in that. So you can see now we're moving into metal roofs. So I won't spend too much time on this because, again, we could do full on presentations on this. And I will call out that S5 has some great webinars and some great training and some great products. And we've actually partnered with them because there's so many different metal roof profiles out there for metal roofs that you need to know what style, what type. There's corrugated, there's standing seam. Those are the most popular, and then there's different styles within those and different profiles, and S5 does a great job of cataloging that and showing you what's the best mount. Some of them are non-penetrating, like standing seam clamps, and some of them do penetrate into the ribs or the pan, and they have gaskets and butyl and things like that pre-installed on them. We've gone ahead and partnered with SnapNrack and S5 have partnered together, and we've made pre-kits. So all of our mounts come what we call rail ready, meaning that you have a bracket that eliminates a T-bolt to attach the rail, and it's already on the mount and you can snap that in. So this is getting into some of the innovations, and we have had racking manufacturers copying us, but we are the original creators of the snap in feature to a rail component like this that's pre-installed on the mount. In my opinion, this is kind of revolutionary. You eliminate a SKU, you skip a step, and it makes it so much faster. And I have some slides to show that in more detail, but we have partnered with S5 to take their clamps, which have been tried and true. They come from a background of snow retention and snow guards, and they're doing the same thing, putting up mounts to hold up snow guard rails to protect the public from snow piling up and falling off the roof and causing injuries. Or blockage to doorways, and they adapted over the years. They have huge experience with this, and they've been in the industry a long time doing specific solar versions of their mounts, and we just felt like it was a good idea to partner with them and add our brackets to that. So if you're already using S5, you can use our new SnapNrack S5 combo mounts, and excuse me, it's all on our website. Everything's on our website, roof based. So if you're looking at mounts that we offer, just go to that section of roofing and click on the roof type, and it'll show you the whole full catalog. Waterproofing is a big topic. So, I think everyone knows the answer to this, but if you don't, take a wild guess. But what do you guys think? What does the group here think that is the number one cause of roof leaks and callbacks? I'd love to know if you guys will get this right. So, is it like old roofing, degrading of shingles and roofing material? Is it poorly done sealant based products or wrong installs? I guess you can put that into that category. Or is it missed pilot holes? So I see a couple people answering. I'll give a few minutes there. But callbacks are a big typically I will say I've been in the industry with root racking companies for almost 20 years now. And every callback I've heard of roof leaks and customers trying to deal with it and diagnose it has always been installer error. And things happen. And I'll show you some examples here. But I think you guys are probably going to get the answer correct. Yes, you did by a huge majority. So missed pilot holes. I'm guessing that we have a lot of installers on here because that is, I'm going to just, you know, say that the number one issue is roof leaks. Every time I've seen a leak, it's because the installer drilled a hole and didn't realize, and it happens. And this is why in my trainings, I showed this picture. These two pictures are one's gonna make you cringe, the bottom one. And that's what we called, if you saw my slide where I finding rafters and I had exploratory drilling at the end and I had that big red line through it, don't do that. And that's exactly what that is at the bottom down there. Somebody was trying to find the rafter, got frustrated, and just blasted, looks like 7 or 8 holes in the roof and just kept missing, and finally got the rafter and didn't even install the lag properly in the dead center. I will say finding rafters is not always easy. Sometimes it's tough, and I understand the frustration, but you have to be prepared to seal that up. And a lot of times installers work in assembly lines. So that picture of the X and the O there is actually a picture I took, and I was on a roof and I was finding rafters. And you miss. Sometimes you miss, and sometimes when you miss, one missing once is enough to fish in your like a piece of copper or a tool to find the rafter and determine getting dead center. But the guy next, the installer after you, may not know which hole to go into, which is the actual one to mount to, and which is the one that was a missed pilot hole. So I always communicate if you don't have color coordination going on with red, blue, or yellow crayons, you can just do an X and an O. The X is the wrong one, the O is the one to go into. So if you communicate, that will help you a lot to avoid that issue. So, there's different tricks to finding the rafters, but you definitely don't want to avoid drilling too many holes. That is definitely the number one cause of roof leaks. And as we get into this waterproofing section and we talk about styles, there's so many, every roof manufacturer or racking manufacturer, sorry, in the industry, we all, and this industry is beautiful because we're all pretty much friends. I have a drink every now and then with some of my colleagues that are competitors, and we get along pretty well. And all of us have to test for structural on mounting systems like pull out and shear. Like you see an example there on the right is a pull out test. There's also shear test, that's structural. And then you get waterproof testing. The one on the left is a complete fully submergent test that a lot of manufacturers will do in-house and report back. And then you do third-party testing as well, where you get things like 2703A or QL 441. There's all these different test standards, wind-driven rain test. We all have to do some of these testing, and we don't, at least SnapNrack doesn't release a product unless we do some of this testing to make sure it's going to last. So getting into the technologies of sealing, and this gets into the history, I'll talk about this in a minute, but metal flashings were tried and true since the early 2000s, I'd say. Maybe, a little later, 2006, 7, 8 is when they started using them, and I'll show some slides on that. Then you got sealant-based mounts started to make an entry a little bit and didn't last too long before butyl took over. And so the history of all this, and I can go on and on about this, and I know we're getting close to the end of the hour, and I want to make sure there's time for questions, but this is just a quick, brief history. And I put in Photon Magazine because Billy might be laughing because this is old school. And that was it was a European magazine, and it had a US presence for a short time. They're no longer, long gone. But they had this on the cover of a magazine. And if you really zoom in, people were up in arms about this back in like 2006 or something. I don't know. It might even say on there. I think I have the issue hard copy still in a box, which is historical. But they had non-solar mounts, and it was just all gooped up. So we call this the goop and a prayer era in the early days, where they were just putting literally blocks of wood, angle stock. Then it graduated to L feet. And some might argue those systems still last today, but maybe they did a really good job with the sealant, but they're not tested, they're not proven, and they have leaked. And you get expansion, contraction, and there's issues. And any roofer will tell you that is not a good way to do it. You still get roofers questioning butyl because they're not used to it. So we graduated, and I talked about my days at QuickMount. I helped get the company started back in 2006 ish. I think we launched. And we introduced the first ever solar mount flashing because roofers were getting involved and saying, hey, you got to use some kind of pipe flashing. And pipe flashings were getting introduced in the early, like in like the late 90s, early 2000s, which was, the right way to go because solar installers were saying, hey, they're right. We can't do this. We have to do this right. We got to do like a roofer. The problem is some of these things don't last as long as PV systems or even roofing now, and they can be installed incorrectly. So that graduated into the old tried and true metal flashing. QuickMount was acquired and everybody copied them. Every manufacturer has, I believe, their own version of some kind of metal flashing because some installers really still want this. And quite frankly, some AHJs might still require this. So I would say the 2010-ish around there is just rough, is kind of that innovation era in solar. You got things like metal flashings coming into play, even butyl started coming in the early days. Then you got prefabricated mids and ends that were spring loaded and ready set right out of the box, which this is going to show my gray beard a little higher, but like I always joke and say this is what solar did to me because it's stressful and the solar coaster has been a crazy ride. But some of these new installers are very spoiled. Everything's out of the box, ready to go, click, fit, pre-assembled, spring loaded, ready for your convenience. But back in the early days, we had to build our own mids and ends, and that was, and then you had to slide it from the side of the rail, and it was a long day, so now everything's very streamlined, and you had that happening in like 2010-ish era, and then you got rail free systems that were introduced. And rail free is removing rails and clamping to the module frames, which we all know, like Zep Solar was acquired, and it was a revolutionary for some installers to see a big company acquire a rail-free system, and every racking company kind of jumped and tried to create those. So I'll skip through this because we talked about that. There's pros and cons to metal flashings. They can be hard to install, but they are long-standing and proven. They still do exist, so you don't have to do the butyl mounts, but you can see sometimes it's hard to install flashings in really hot climates, or they can be installed wrong, as we've seen. The sealant-based mounts are a little time-consuming, can be a little messy. I think we've all evolved. The whole industry is kind of evolving more towards this butyl flashing, and I've heard them called flashless. Don't call them flashless because you might get a red flag from a jurisdiction. They're butyl flashing. So butyl flashing is a rubberized kind of, it's butyl and it's malleable to some degree and it's self-sealing. And a lot of times the mounts can be rafter mounted or deck mounted, meaning you're using smaller screws and you don't have to pre-drill, and it self-seals as it attaches. So that's revolutionary in the industry. It means you don't have to pry shingles. You can place it down. You can deck attach. We'll talk a lot about that as we get going. So I know we're getting down to close to that mark, so I'm going to blast through here. Waterproofing, I mentioned. Underlayment flashing. Here's the call out for some jurisdictions calling out for double flashing for tile roofs. If you want more information on that, it is on our website, snapnrack.com. You can check deck flashing. Oh, it's right there. So I hope that played out well. That's kind of hard to put. Sorry, it's kind of hard to play videos in these, but it does show you the installation process of that underlayment flashing. So getting into the revolutionary part of things, waterproofing's taken a huge leap with different styles, but rail-ready mounts, this is what I mentioned before, and SnapNrack, I believe, is the one of the only, if the only, mounting company that has every mount ready to go, comp tile, flat roofs, you name it, all have a rail bracket pre-installed on the mount. So what this means is you can install all your mounts, and then instead of setting the rail, grabbing a bag of T-bolts and putting it in, or some kind of rail hardware, it's already on the mount. So you're skipping that step and you just snap the rail in and you can slide it and move it. So T-bolts are still out there. They do have some issues. I've seen T-bolts fail. I've seen T-bolts be installed incorrectly. And hanging a rail off a T-bolt on the weak side tends to be a standard thing, and it does minimize the strength. So what we've done is we've put the bracket on the front side and we've made it strong over the anchor point, and you can actually turn the bracket to the side and drill right through it with your bit. So that allows us to put the bracket on the mount ready to go out of the box. So, and then it also allows you to slide the rail easily without binding the T-bolts and raise it pretty easily. So this was, in my opinion, revolutionary in all of our different mounts. We have the Ultrafoot series. Our Ultrafoot deck is our most popular because you can attach to the rafter or the deck with the same number 14 screws. And deck attachments is another big one that is a topic. And I'm going to skip to this because rafters are always, the best option, but sometimes you can't necessarily get to the rafter and you have to deck attach. So having the option to do both is really critical. Things like cantilevers might be something you're interested in, like for deck attachments, or spans might be too far. You might have big, huge beams. Like I've seen church installs where they have these big, beautiful beams that they install to, but in between they're 10-foot gaps and they want to attach something there, or maybe your cantilever is too long, cantilever being the end of the rail to the last mount. You need that to be within a certain range to not exceed the racking manufacturer's spec, which is typically around that 16 inches. Some standardize on a 12-inch just to keep it safe. But if there's no rafter there, or the rafter's outside of the array and looks ugly, you can deck attach. And we have different methods of deck attaching. We have number 14 screws, and we also have these new deck anchors. This is also a new huge invention, or innovation, I should say, that SnapNrack is the only one doing this. And so the deck anchor 2.5 is a new anchor that allows you to do only 2 deck attachment screws instead of 4 or 6, which is very common in the industry with number 14 screws. And if I go back, if you see that little picture in the middle on the right there, there's the number 14s on the right and the deck anchors on the left. That's a little experiment and video I did where I filmed underneath the roofing, and I installed 4 of the deck and number 14s and 2 of the deck anchors on the left. And what I was demonstrating is if you over tighten those number 14s, they can spin out on you. So, the decking's only going to withstand a certain amount of force, whereas those deck anchors, you can blast it. And I did hit it as hard as I could with the impact drill, and it just kept compressing the ply and it wouldn't spin. So they're 6 times stronger than a standard decking or a standard number 14 screw. Number 14s are not bad. They're very, very sensitive to over torquing. And if you over torque going into ply, it could spin out very easily, and then you've compromised your pull out strength of that mount. So deck attachment has been a huge improvement in the industry. And if you're curious about those deck anchors, definitely go and check our website. Wire management has had huge innovations. I don't know if you've been paying attention, but every racking manufacturer offers some sort of package of products for wire management. SnapNrack, I think, has the best. We have clips that will allow you to keep it in the rail and snap it in. And we also have wire management grips. We call it the wire clamp, universal wire clamp. This is the wire retention clip that allows you to snap wires into the rail channel. If you're in a really wet climate, you can actually take the connector outside of the rail, snap these 2 pieces into the rail, and hold it into a nice firm spot. a lot of installers use zip ties. Zip ties should only be used as an extra measure or as a get you, clean up something, but it should be secondary, not a primary wire management solution. These wire clamps allow you to do row jumps, so you can grip the wire without compressing or pinching. It has a space for four PV wires or two trunk cables in there to jump across arrays. And then some other innovations. We're starting to see products do more than one thing. So this is a good example. Our OmniLug does both the MLPE mounting to the rail and also does the bonding for bonding row to row for grounding and bonding on the electrical side. Junction boxes have taken a huge leap. You're seeing more boxes available for racking on rails. SnapNrack has a full line of a standard R box, which is the smaller one. Then we have the XL, which is a bigger box. And then we have the flashed box as well. So I know we're right at that 15-minute mark, so I'm going to wrap up here. And the last thing I really wanted to point out is a huge innovation that we've been seeing is rail-free systems. And this is not for everyone. I am the classic old dog solar installer that doesn't want to learn new tricks. And so there is a learning curve with this. And I've kind of, held on to my rail hard in Southern California because it's just tried and true and easy. But I will say in certain areas where rail free makes a lot of sense, a lot of re-roofs happen with this because there's a deck attachment option. I will say that SnapNrack, after reviewing their system when I came on board 2 years ago, I was very impressed. And I came onto a job and did it, and it was really easy to do, especially this TopSpeed Original. These require no rafter attachments, and they're put on, if you look at this picture, this is really innovative where you're putting the racking onto the frame of the module. So backing up, the definition truly of rail-free systems is it's not rail-free, it's that there's no long extruded rails. The frame of the module now becomes the structural rail. So by doing that, you have a series of brackets that grab the joints of modules, or you're grabbing the modules where a mid clamp would go, and you're securing the frame of the module. This is honestly revolutionary to the industry. It's not for everyone. If your crew doesn't want to do this, you don't have to. But in places like Colorado, New Jersey, some parts of Southern California, we're seeing now, they're starting to do rough-in inspections, which are basically racking inspections, and they require 2 inspections instead of 1, which means you can't put down modules until the racking is in place and an inspector comes. And it's like, the old phone company telling you that a serviceman's going to be coming, or an inspector is going to be coming, from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. And you just have to sit around and wait. And so that's a waste of time. It's a waste of your crew member being there. So it's a waste of money. So a lot of those crews in those jurisdictions are finding that rail-free eliminates that rough-in inspection, and it allows you to put down your modules with the racking because it is a part of the structural element of the system, and you're allowed to do that. So we have 2 TopSpeed systems. There's TopSpeed Universal, and there's TopSpeed Original, which is this one. You may see some new products coming out. Hint, hint, wink, nudge, nudge. We may have some new products and adaptations to this in the semi-near future, so definitely get onto our newsletter email list. We try to update you with just key updates, but this product has been fantastic for installers either doing a re-roof or adding to a system. Even homeowners can do this. So this is a really cool system where you put the bracket onto the frame of the module before you take it up, hoist it up, and now you can place it. The first row is set with the skirt. You put in the module into that front row, lay down the module, and as you lay it down, the screws are captive, ready for you to go, and you just zap them into the ply and you're good. If you hit a rafter, great, because that's only going to make it stronger. But these are rated to go to the decking. And now the newest version of this product, it used to be sealant based, and now it has evolved to the butyl version of this. So if you're using TopSpeed and you are begging for butyl, it is now available. So you can check our website and make sure you get the newest one. This is the older version where you can put the sealant in there, but now it does come with pre-installed butyl on the mount. So some key things, we can open up to questions now. I apologize, I went Only 5 minutes over, so that's a record for me probably. So just some key takeaways I wanted to put out there. Reviewing installation processes with your team. If you're, I'm assuming everyone's crew here or leading a crew or is about to lead a crew or owns a company. If you're not, then you can ask the right questions here and I'll answer them as best I can. But if you're running crews, it's the best crews always have a safety meeting and or a meeting either weekly or maybe every morning, depends on if things are going wrong and you have to keep rolling back to the job to fix something. There needs to be some kind of install meeting in the morning to talk about it, listen to your crew. If someone brings up an issue and brings a solution, great. If there's problems, you need to find those problems and you need to find solutions, and that can be often done with the right product selection or the installation process. So reviewing your installation process and efficiency is key. Adapting and improving site visits based on your region is also key, and again, avoid issues and maybe select the right products. Understanding basic roofing of the area is also key. You might run into those like metal shingles, stone coated steel. I have run into those and I understand how to operate those. So if you want help, I can help you there. Choosing better wire management solutions. Not enough people are buying these products, and I see it in the numbers. And once I show crews, they realize that the little bit of investment on better wire management solutions does give you better product or better end result and ends up be speeding up the job and make it longer lasting. So all of that's going to help you decide on products, and we can open it up to questions now. I just wanted to kind of connect the dots of what we're talking about here. And the advantages of SnapNrack is basically addressing all those things. We have all the solutions you need. We have all the different options for products we talked about and innovations. It's all built into our product. So without further ado, I'll leave my contact info here. Here's my email. And again, I am the sales manager for California and Hawaii, but I do have a technical background and I'm happy to help and work with customers. So we can open up some questions. Billy, I don't know if you're going to take that on or if Lindsay's still on.
Yeah, I will handle that. So we'll leave up your contact info for a moment longer before switching over to the Q&A slide. But we are going to take some questions now. Feel free to submit those. We have a few on deck. Let's start off with this one. Do you trust Butyl?
Great question. And, I am of the old school mentality of tried and true metal flashings because I know how to install them. But after doing years of Butyl installs, my answer to that question is yes. I do trust Butyl. You do need to keep in mind that when you do a pilot hole and you miss, you no longer have that big flashing. So you want to make sure you have like card flashings and you can flash that. The only time I don't trust Butyl is if there's too many pilot holes drilled. And you want to make sure you seal that up with an additional flashing. But yeah, I would say the thing I like about Butyl the most is that you can get smaller lags, like 2 number 14 screws to the rafter, which means you don't have to drill pilot holes and you avoid that issue of the risk of pilot holes. And you can drill straight into the rafter or go into the deck. And then the Butyl gets kind of sucked in with the threads and it does seal it. And I have seen those last pretty long. So I do trust Butyl. It took me a long time and a lot of testing to prove it. But I do trust it, yes.
All right. Next up, which junction box do you find to be safer for leaks? Rail-based or roof-attached and flashed?
That's a great question. That's kind of a tough one. Great question. I haven't had that before. I would say rail-based is probably my preference because you don't have to, cut the roof at all. I try to avoid cutting the roof at all costs possible, but putting in a roof-based flashed box is not hard to do anymore. And they are trusted, but I would say at least you definitely, it's all dependent on the box lid, and there's NEMA ratings and all that, and you got to put in the rubber gasket. Just make sure it's properly seated because sometimes they can get undone if you manhandled the box a little too much, and it might be maybe in shipping. But I think I prefer, and that's just me personally, rail-based systems, but all have been proven to withstand all the weather elements. And I would say under the array is better. I know some jurisdictions even require it to be outside of the array. It's not my preference, but if it's under the array, rail mounted, it has a better chance of, withstanding the elements. And if you're an installer in Portland, Oregon, you're going to be different than an installer in Arizona, meaning that you get different heat, different rain. And so that's important to note as well. Any other questions?
All right. Yeah. Okay. Okay, here we go. Sometimes the finance side of the industry talks about racking systems as one bucket, but on the roof, the attachment decision is its own technical decision. Roof type, waterproofing structure, AHJ expectations, installer workflow. How should installers think about the mount separately from the racking system?
That's a great question. I would say, like I said, our Ultra Rail deck has been the most popular because it's so simplified in the sense that you use the same screws, the number 14 SnapNrack screws for either rafter or deck, and it's butyl and it's very adaptable. I would say, finding every TPO has a AVL, and they will list what mounts are, approved, and then it's just a matter of what cost you want to go with, because there are some very expensive mounts, especially in tile. Tile, you can get like a replacement flashing mount that has the whole thing, and it's $50 or something crazy. I don't even know, but versus a tile hook that can be half the cost, and you still have waterproofing elements. So it's definitely regionally based. I would choose which mount is most efficient for your team and most adaptable to the scenarios you run into, and then make sure it's on the AVL and backtrack from there. But I would say keeping your crew happy is number one, and then making sure it's in line with your TPO or your finance company, and it's approved on the AVL, and the cost makes sense. So it's a little bit multifaceted, but I would say let the installers choose their top two that they prefer and then go from there. I hope that answers the question. I know it's a little tricky, but yeah, just choosing what the crew likes and if it mixes well with your budget on the system and if it's on the AVL. Which most are,
All
and
right.
we're on every AVL SnapNrack. So if you have questions on that, feel free to reach out.
Okay, next up. We've always avoided rafter mounts, not for fear of failing to hit in the first place, but for concern about hitting the same hole after the roof is replaced. Are there any tips for hitting an existing rafter hole after a re-roofing? Should we avoid the existing rafter hole and make a new one, or otherwise?
That's a really good question. And as we get into re-roofs, that's a tough one. I would say, depending on the truss system, going into the same hole is pretty near impossible. It's doable, but do you want to do it? Because who knows how good that install was. And then there's on the flip side of that, putting an additional 50 holes or whatever it is in new holes into that, is that going to compromise the truss system? That's why you're starting to see more re-roofs going to decking to exactly avoid that issue. But I personally wouldn't want to go into the same existing hole. And again, none of this reflects SnapNrack. It's more, we can't give full advice on that. But me personally, I would say that I wouldn't want to go into the pre-existing hole. I guess it's a really hard answer to give. I would say if you have a roofer on staff, talk to them. Or if there's a roofer involved, also get their opinion. Or if you just know roofers, ask them that question. I would probably venture to guess that they'll say don't go into the existing holes. I could be wrong. And go either new holes or deck attach. And I will say those deck anchors have been a huge success. I think installers don't realize we have it. And once, if you ever go to our conferences, we do carry, we have roof boards that you can drill into at the big conferences. And we have installers drill them just to see and feel it. But I highly recommend getting a sample, checking out the deck anchors. It could be a good solution for you to only do 2 holes instead of 4 or 6 deck attachments with those newer deck anchors from SnapNrack. So I would say deck attaching is probably the better solution, but it's going to be regionally based and depending on the structural integrity of the truss system and how many. Good question, though. These are great questions.
All right, so we have hit the hour. That's all the time we have for questions today. If we didn't get to your question, our presenter may reach out to you directly following the broadcast. Please take a moment to fill out the survey that will appear when this webinar concludes. We use your feedback to improve our future webinars, and this webinar will be shared with all registrants so you can view it again at your convenience. I'd like to thank Johan for being here and doing today's presentation, and SnapNrack for sponsoring today's webinar. And thank you to everyone in our audience for participating. We hope you enjoyed our presentation and invite you to join us for more Solar Power World webinars in the future. Thanks.
Thank you.